Hi everybody, Lisa from Supportive Tarot. Welcome to the very first video in my Tarot Memoirs series. So in this series, I'm going to be showing off some examples of the Fool card, or sorry, of every card in the tarot. Ideally, I'm going to work through all 78, so we'll see how this goes. But I'm definitely starting with the Major Arcana. I'm going to be going through one card at a time and talking about what that card means to me and examples from my own personal life, lessons I've learned, experiences I've had that I relate to the energies of those particular cards. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. I want to do this partly because for me, the tarot is a very real, tangible example of how I live my day-to-day life, of big moments, of small moments, and that is how I use the tarot, is to support me through day-to-day living and to give me a relatable piece of a relatable tool, maybe is the best way to express it. And so I want to start off today with the Fool. So the Fool, I'm just going to show you my Rider-Waite. This is the Centennial in a tin. It's my only classic Rider-Waite, so sorry that it's a little small. So we see our typical figure here. He's at the edge of the cliff. He's got a white rose in his hand, symbolizing innocence and purity. And he has a little dog nipping at his heels, maybe warning him. Maybe he's not listening or noticing. And so there's a whole lot. Oh, there we go. Now I got some focus. Oh, I see. It's competing with my face. There we go. So there's a whole lot we can take from the Fool, just from the image alone. But, oh, and quick reminder, this is going to be long, so maybe grab a cup of coffee or tea or a glass of wine if you like. I love this. It says Namaste in bed. The coffee I'm drinking this morning is this really nutty, like vanilla hazelnut. It's super delicious. It's probably going to go cold because I'm not going to stop talking, but we'll see. So I thought I'd start out. I've got some of my favorite tarot books out, and I've highlighted some passages from the Fool card's description in those books. So I'd like to start out with Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. Does anybody else use like extra tarot cards or title cards from decks as bookmarks? This is a 7 of coins. When I got my Legacy of the Divine tarot, it had a bunch of extra cards from the coin suits, so I saved them for bookmarks. Extra cards. Usually when you get something like that happening in a tarot deck, you are missing cards. But yeah, I had almost half the Pentacle suit duplicated in my Legacy of the Divine. Printing error for the win. Beautiful bookmarks. So anyways, in Rachel Pollack, some of the pieces that I've highlighted here that stood out to me about the Fool. For those willing to take the chance, the leap can bring joy, adventure, and finally, for those with the courage to keep going, when the wonderland becomes more fearsome than joyous, the leap can bring knowledge, peace, and liberation. I love that passage because for me, the Fool is often energy I see in light rather than in shadow. And there's a whole bunch of reason for that that's related to my personal life, but that really stood out to me. I really liked that because even when the Fool screws up, and he will, she will, even when the Fool screws up, there's lessons to be learned, there's wisdom to be gained. It still can be a really powerful experience. So another passage I've got highlighted here. The bag behind him carries his experiences. He does not abandon them. He is not mindless. They simply do not control him in the way that our memories and traumas so often control our lives. That is so powerful. And this is the Fool at his best, where he doesn't let the past memories and trauma control him. That's I think the Fool at his very best. But it's really powerful to consider that we could carry our experiences in such a way, that's the bag they're talking about over his shoulder, or that Rachel's talking about, that we could carry our experiences in a light way. I think often we get hung up on carrying our experiences in a very heavy way, and I like the idea that you could just stuff them all in a little satchel, toss them over your shoulder, and go, yeah, that's a part of my life, but it doesn't have to define how I live it. And I think that's really powerful. And then I want to get into shadow a little bit here as well. So I have to move the mouse away from the stop button on my video because I totally started filming this and accidentally turned it off last time. And I don't really want to edit or cut pieces together, at least not yet. I want to keep it boop, forward. So anyways, sorry. Shadow, for the Fool, a reversal, and I don't read reversals, but I do read shadow. For the Fool, a reversal means, first of all, a failure to follow your instincts. That is really powerful, hey? Like that really what we're seeing in shadow and the Fool is maybe that we're not listening to that primal gut instinct. It can mean not taking a chance at some crucial time because of fear or depending too much on plans and the practical advice of others. And that has a whole lot of relevance in my life too. Another reverse meaning of the Fool will appear at first to contradict the one just given. Recklessness, wildness, crazy schemes all seem the opposite of overcaution, and yet they originate from the same weakness, a failure to act from inside. The reckless person superimposes a conscious or artificial foolishness on his life, both because he does not trust the unconscious to act as a guide, and because he is also afraid of doing nothing. Like, how amazing is that? And that, by the way, the pieces that I've highlighted, as you can see, are just the smallest bit of what is available in this. Oh, sorry, I turned to the Magician. There was that piece there from the Fool, and we keep going. And there was that piece, and we keep going. And there's that piece. Like, there's a lot in this book. If you don't have this book, this is really good at going in depth into all the cards. So that's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And I'll be diving into that every week for excerpts. And then I also have Benabelle Wen's incredible Holistic Tarot. Warning, if you are like me and you've been seeing this book flashed around on YouTube and not realized quite how massive it was until you held it in your hands, I'm just gonna show you. Holy moly, this thing is enormous. The fact that Benabelle, a human being who is not like 85 years old, actually managed to write all of this completely blows my mind. And this book is incredible, and I'm so glad I have it. That might be a story for another day. There's so much in here. I can't even with this. But for now, I'm just going to go into this. Oh, and just for reference, those colored marks, that's where the card definitions are. So I've got them colored Major Arcana and then colored for the suit, for the elemental energy of the suit. But you can see card descriptions is just the tiniest portion, and it's meaty, but it's just the tiniest portion of this book. There's so much here. You don't know. I can't. I can't with this. But let's get into what I've highlighted here. So the piece that stood out to me from Benabelle's description: when the Fool appears in a reading, it is about a point in the seeker's life when the next step could either send the seeker flying into the air over that cliff with impressive accomplishment or falling down from naivete. I think that's really good. And then she's also got here, the temperament of the Fool is one pure in spirit, open-hearted, and like a child, innocent and naive. And I really appreciate that as well, because innocence in the Fool and being open-hearted is something I'm going to talk about when I show you some different images of the Fool here. And then finally, for a bit of a different take, I also have Melissa Sanova's Kitchen Table Tarot. I love this book for its sass, for its conciseness. I love that I get a lot of information in a really plain talk, and just a more playful maybe approach to the cards, while still not dishonoring in any way what they're trying to tell us. So anyways, in her section on the Fool, I highlighted this. Walking along, exploring and curious. Sorry, she says, I love the Fool. That might make more sense. I love the Fool. Walking along, exploring and curious, and after you smack into that brick wall, walking away having learned. I can't help but think that the drop that he's about to have isn't that far at all. That after his fall, he'll stand up and grin. So you get like a full, with hers, you get like a full card image and then some description. She's also got a little thing here that I really think is really powerful, similar to what the Fountain Tarot does, that little teeny blurb, and it's action oriented. So in hers, in Melissa's book here, Under the Fool, she says, I am going. And that's really the energy of the Fool, isn't it? Like, I'm going to go. I'm going. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not going to plan. I'm not going to pack. I'm not going to make lists or organize what the destinations or stops along the way are going to be. I'm just going to go. And I like that from here. So now let's talk about it was really hard not to pull out the Fool of every single deck because I love doing card comparisons. So I'm going to try to see if I can do two hands and not totally screw myself up. So here's our original Fool. And then here we have, this is the Fool from the Tarot of the Magical Forest. Little pig just heading up on the cliff. It's pretty similar. I love how wide the eyes are. I know they're wide and big in every card in this deck, but I do really like this. And then a lot of my other images are going to be really, really different. So I have here the Fool from the Guardian Tarot. This is a tarot that I pull for myself, for self-love and self-guidance and self-nurturing. What I love about this image is the way that this figure is totally arched back, literally leading with their heart. I adore the way that that posture makes me think of the Fool. And so often I think of the Fool in this way where I'm thinking of the Fool as being really open-hearted and courageous, but in a non-intentional way. This is the Fool from the Mary L. And believe it or not, the thing that, you'll probably believe it, the thing that actually I notice the most is the nudity in this card. And most of the time in tarot, nudity doesn't stand out to me in a negative or positive way. It's just there. But in this card, there's that take me as I am energy, that vulnerability. And I think especially because it's male nudity, I have this perception of incredible vulnerability in this card. And the fact that the face is covered in this, there's so much that this says to me, but in particular, I see this is what happens. He's surrounded by butterflies. This is what happens when you drop the mask, so to speak. I know he's wearing one, but when you drop the mask, when you're just yourself, when you say to the world, no, this is who I am. You can take me or you can leave me, but it doesn't change my right to exist exactly as I am. Powerful. I like it. This is another open-hearted, free, expansive expression of the Fool. This is from the Shadowscapes Tarot. I wish the image was bigger. Is it focusing? I'm going to put it in front of my face so you can really see it. There we go. Yeah. It's like I need the camera to not look at me. Look at the card. Look at the card. I love how she's on this like pillar and open-hearted, and all these birds are around her with little ribbons, and there's so much trust in this image. There's so much trust and faith. But again, I don't think it's conscious faith. It's unconscious faith. It's not mindless, but it's definitely the kind of faith you have when you don't realize you have faith. You know what I mean? It's like you just assume everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Of course it's going to be fine. Why wouldn't it be fine? That's the energy I get from that. This is from the Tarot of the Healing Light. We see the figure leaping, just leaping, and the dog is like, what are you doing? Come back. What are you doing? I love that. From the Fountain Tarot, I got to remember to put this back since I'm working with this deck this week. Focus on the card, not me. There we go. You get movement, rushing ahead. Rushing ahead. I adore, this is probably one of my favorite Fool cards of all time from the Wild Unknown, even though this artwork has taken me some getting used to. And I love it. It's beautiful, but it's just not been my typical style. I'm going to move this a little bit in front of my face so it'll focus well. That bird, that first step, that like, you know what? My wings are going to work. Of course they're going to work. Why wouldn't they work? This card from my newer addition to my collection, the Deviant Moon. I think this is one of the cards, one of the few cards that shows more. Oh, I forgot to start. I stopped holding up the Rider-Waite. This is one of the cards that I think talks or speaks more to me anyways, to the shadow side, to the fingers in the ears, la 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 la, I can't hear you, I'm doing my own thing, I don't care. Meanwhile, like just like, oh, there's no danger, everything's fine, and there's like this like little bitey fish going after him. Does that fish actually have teeth? Yeah, it's totally biting his leg. Yeah, totally. And this one I think speaks to the what happens when you ignore instinct, when you just rush ahead without thinking of the consequences. This one, to me, speaks to shadow, at least with my own personal experience, which I'll talk more about. And then finally we have, I've pulled from this is another one that I think speaks more to the shadow side, oddly. This is from the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Poppy Palin. We see this construction worker up high. He's already spilled some paint. He's just about to walk off the edge. There's something really that feels especially irresponsible to me about this particular Fool. He's on a work site, so not only may he get injured, but he might end up hurting other people. That spilled paint, which I know is turning into the waters here down at the bottom, that spilled paint could interfere with somebody else's ability to be safe. And I think that really caught my attention about this particular card, because there's not a lot, I think, of Fool cards that I can see the shadow as easily. So the Deviant Moon one and this one definitely helped me to see that irresponsibility element of the Fool. So with that, I want to get into some Fool experiences from my life that I would like to share. So I thought I'd share some light, some shadow, and then maybe a big experience if I've got one for each card. So first I'm going to start with something light. And this one is going to be no surprise to any of you, but starting this YouTube channel for me was totally a Fool experience. It was totally a just jumping in. Don't worry about the consequences. Like, don't overthink it. Don't overplan it. And let me tell you, I tried to plan it. I tried to overthink it. I tried like 4 times to film a video while I was overthinking it. I was like, okay, if I'm going to jump into the tarot community, first what I need to do is like plan all my content, and I need to start with a video that like people are going to be really into. I want to show some decks. I want to do this. I want to do what everybody else is doing. This was the energy I originally was going to start my channel with. And then, as you all know from watching, those of you who watched my first video know, something happened that shook me out of that place. That was like, wait, hold up. That's not what it's all about. That's not why I wanted to be a part of this community. I wanted to be a part of this community to connect with people, to share in a vulnerable and authentic way, because that is my powerful personal work. Being vulnerable, and being vulnerable in a way in the public eye is something that I think is really important, and especially in today's day and age. I think we need more. It's not for everybody. Let's just say that. I will never judge somebody else for not being vulnerable on camera, for not sharing personal experiences on camera. This is a personal decision, and I am blessed enough in my personal life to be able to do that and not be concerned about the consequences. So for me, it was important to jump into this full steam ahead, and to start with some realness. And not to say there's not going to be realness everywhere. There will be. I don't know how to be any other way. But when I teach yoga, when I speak in front of a group of people, the thing that is always my driving sort of heart center of all of it is being as vulnerable as I can be in that moment. Because I think it's our vulnerability that teaches each other that it's okay to show all of ourselves to the world. And I know it's not that simple, and I make it sound like it is, but I could talk about this all day. But truly, starting this YouTube channel was a Fool energy for me. And it was, in some ways, I really had to get out of my own way. It's why I did a live so early, because I'm like, I need to get out of my head. I need to get out of my way. I need to just talk. I need to show you all how excited I am to be here, how excited I was to have any subscribers in the first couple of days. The fact that you are all resonating, those of you who are subscribed, and hopefully if you're watching now and you end up subscribing, the fact that what I have to say can resonate with others is, it feels really good. It feels really good. It feels good to know that I can connect with you. So let's talk about a shadow Fool experience. And I did make notes so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say. So for me, don't make it go all the way away. There we go. Shadow. Okay, so the Fool's shadow side to me represents irresponsibility to a certain degree, being unaware of damage that can happen to you or others from your recklessness. And so there was a period in my life shortly after I moved out of home, and I moved out of a home that was, and probably something I'm going to end up sharing in bits and pieces throughout the time that I'm on this platform, but I came from a home that was very tightly controlled. My home was, as I viewed it at that stage of my life, I was in a very overprotected home. And so I had actually very little, if any, social experience, very little. I had very little experience navigating relationships. I was like, literally like that bird in the Fool card. I had no idea what was in the world, what people were really like. At that point in my life, 90% of my social interaction easily was the just barely begun internet. And before that, bulletin boards and forums. That was where I got my social fix. So I didn't have a lot of real in-person, face-to-face experiences. And at the age that I was when I moved out of my home, my childhood home, I was 19 or 20 at that time. And at that age, everything is happening to you all at once. You're discovering sexuality. Well, I was discovering sexuality. I was discovering um, what it was like to experience a sensation of freedom. And freedom. You know, there's a whole lot of stereotypes about people that come out of overprotective or overprotected or over-controlled environments. And the stereotype I'm going to refer to, and I mean it no disrespect, but it's the one I'm familiar with, is like this whole Catholic school for girls sort of mentality. We have this stereotype that you come out of Catholic school for girls and then you go crazy right after that. Like when you go to college or when you're finally out of that environment. That was what it was for me moving out of my childhood home. I suddenly was aware of any restriction or rule or boundary in my life. I needed none of it. I wanted it all gone. I wanted to just do whatever. I didn't want to think about what could happen. I wasn't thinking about what could happen. I was just like, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. If I want to go to the bar and party with my friends, I'm going to do it. And this was new. Like we're talking, like I went through school. I wasn't really allowed to have a job. I wasn't really allowed to go to anything social. If I was going to hang out with my friends, they had to come to my house, which was problematic. Talk about that later. So I didn't have friends. Like I had friends, but my friends and I communicated and spent time together at school. That was it. For the vast majority of my childhood. So suddenly I'm living on my own, well, living with roommates, because living alone would have been way too terrifying at that stage. But I was living with roommates, and suddenly I was like aware of, like, God forbid anybody tell me to change anything about me, change my behavior. No, I wasn't hearing it. I wasn't having it from anybody. And that created a whole bunch of problems in my personal life, as you can imagine. I actually had a really sweet boyfriend at the time, and when I moved out from my parents' home, he'd gotten along well with my family, with my parents, but when I moved out, suddenly he was the most suffocating influence in my life. And it wasn't his fault. He was the most caring guy ever. But suddenly I was like, no, man, things are happening in my head and I need to explore. Like I need to not feel restricted. I need to not feel responsible for any other human being. And so he was caught in the crosshairs of that. And at the same time, of course, I'm discovering my sexuality and I'm experiencing all of that. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. But I'm totally rambling. And I want to get back to the shadow point, the really potent part, the lesson I learned. So it was around this time after I broke up with my boyfriend and I'm like exploring the world and I'm trying to figure out my sexuality and all of this kind of stuff that I ended up on a pseudo date with a much older man. And we had met at a coffee shop and I had told people where I was going, but I had met this dude on the internet. And he's like, hey, you want to come back to my boat? I'm like all of 19 or 20. This guy's probably like 35 or older. And that's not to say anything about age gap relationships. My wife is older than me. I'm not opposed to age gap relationships. But I had met this guy for like 20 minutes. And suddenly I'm in his vehicle. I went to his boat at a marina. I went onto his boat where it was just the two of us. And there was a point, like we were sitting at his kitchen table. And it suddenly dawned on me what the hell I was doing. And I was like, oh my God. Nobody like knows I'm at this guy's boat. They knew I was going to be at a coffee shop with some dude, right? Nobody knows I'm at this guy's boat. I don't even really know where I am. If he was like a serial killer or anything, something horrible could happen to me right now. And the second that that idea hit me, I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And thankfully, I told him that I was suddenly really freaked out. And he, being a gentleman, thankfully, took me back to the coffee shop where my vehicle was or where I'd taken the bus. I don't remember if I was driving then. But along the way, I got a bit of a lecture. And it was deserved, maybe inappropriate. I don't know. But he said, you know, you're lucky that, you know, I had some, he was I don't want to say he was a jerk. He wasn't a jerk. But he had expected that we were going to have sex on that boat. And I didn't know that's where things were going, and I wasn't ready for that. And it could have gone badly. And that's kind of what he said. He's like, if I were a different guy, this could have been a real problem for you. And by that point, I already knew that, and I was already kicking myself. And I actually tell this story often. And the reason I tell this story often, especially when I'm talking to people who are in that just coming away from being restrained or feeling restrained. The reason I tell this story so often is because it is so easy to get caught up in this sweeping energy of movement, of exploring when you discover something new. And that can be when you're discovering tarot. It can be when you're discovering, I don't know, a new social outlet, a new hobby. It's so easy to get caught up in that new exciting energy and end up going down a path you never intended to go. And sometimes we don't realize we've done that until we've done it and we're in it. And I think that's why Rachel Pollack's statement about, you could, it's the lessons we learn. It's the lessons we learn. It's not always going to be that way. Sometimes you're going to open your heart and jump into something, and it's going to be like this YouTube channel, and it's going to feel amazing, and you're going to be surrounded with love and support and help, and everything's going to be fine. But sometimes it's not going to be fine. And sometimes we need to listen to that bit of inner wisdom, and we need to call on that and pull that into our lives. And so I think that's why that experience was such a formative, powerful shadow experience for me. Because many, many people have not been so lucky. Many people have been in a situation like that where out of just trust in humanity, they put themselves in a vulnerable position. And we should, in theory, be able to do that. Humanity, everybody should be trustworthy. Wouldn't that be amazing if everybody was trustworthy? If everybody deserved our faith and our ability to see the positive in them? If everybody was worthy of that? And let me back up. Everybody is technically, I think, worthy of that, but that's a whole other topic. The thing is, we can't do that in today's day and age. We can't only give our trust. But at the same time, I don't think I let that experience keep me from exploring. There's a whole lot of exploration I did in my life that I am grateful that I did, that I may not have done had I let that experience completely stop me in my tracks and scare me so much that I was unwilling to try new things or meet new people. But it reminded me that safety was important, that being impulsive is okay in certain contexts, but that in some contexts, it's better to reel yourself in a little bit. I think I needed that little bit of a scare to learn that lesson in a really tangible, lasting way. So now I want to talk about my biggest, most expansive Fool experience ever in my life. I want to talk about how I met my wife. And that story is all wrapped up in Fool energy. So I met Peggy online, and not on a dating site, and not on a like queer forum, although we were on both of those individually. I met her playing a children's game called Neopets, which was this silly game. I think it still exists today. It was a silly game where you have like a little digital, it's almost like, think about Tamagotchi, but like on a website. So you have like this little pet, and you can have multiple pets, and you sort of play little games to train them, and it's silly. It's amazing. It's very low tech by today's standards, but it was really cute. And I found out about it through a friend who had kids. And Peggy found out about it because she had kids, and we were both playing on this game. And one of the features of this game was that there was like a little chatting area, not live chat, like forum chat, where you can leave a post and respond to other people's posts, which was a super familiar format for me because I grew up in the 90s and the 80s. So anyway, I found out about a sort of guild, like a little mini forum group within the game that was queer, and that was containing mostly butch femme folks, which I was self-identified femme at that point, still today obviously, but before that I wasn't. Self-identified femme, and Peggy was a self-identified butch, and she was actually, I think, running this particular group or in leadership, I forget. And she would run these like little games and challenges, like where people could win all these, I forget what they were called, the Neopets like currency for points for buying objects and training your pet and all that stuff. So we both ended up in that chat group, partly because if you try to, at least then, if you try to go to like a chat room specifically for lesbians or for butch femme or for queer or whatever, sometimes it turns into a bit of a meat market. It turns into a thing that's all about sort of sex and dating and like that kind of energy. And Neopets was like this playful thing. Like it's meant for kids. So you couldn't even talk about, you can use swear words, you couldn't talk about anything inappropriate, like it was highly filtered, so you could only, it was all clean, and that may sound a little bit like, I don't know, but at the time it was really nice, it was really refreshing. I would go there to chat and hang out, Peggy would go there to chat and hang out, and she would be in there building up points for her kids, because she would, whatever the points were called, Neo points or something like that, and so she would give her kids points so they could buy things for their pets and so forth. So she was on it all the time. I was on it all the time. And we also had a mutual friend who pulled us into an actual IM, like instant message chat one night. This is going to be a real long story. I hope your coffee is holding up. Like, I gotta make this quicker. I am not a concise person. I'm gonna work on it though. I'm gonna work on it. Okay, so I'm getting into Neopets detail. I don't need to. So we started talking online, and she was in Canada, and I was in Washington State. I had no intention of going to Canada. I didn't even know. I was such a typical American. I'm just gonna say, like, maybe that's mean. I shouldn't say that. I still love America, but I was fairly typical. I didn't know a lot about Canadian geography. She was in Ontario, and all I knew about Ontario was that it's somewhere out east. It was out east. I thought it was somewhere north of New York, which is kind of sort of true. I actually thought it was the easternmost province in Canada. Just saying, geography not my strong suit. So anyways, we started chatting, and because she was in Canada and I was in the States, and because we got to know each other in such a family-friendly place, our chatting, we started chatting all the time. Like, we started chatting on Instant Messenger multiple hours a day. I would come home from work, I would pop up the chat, we would talk, and we would talk pretty much until it was time for me to go to bed. And neither of us thought anything of this. It was like, oh, new friend, cool. We're both used to making friends online. It wasn't a big deal. And I think because we both assumed we would never ever meet in person, neither one of us had the financial means, neither one of us had the inclination to travel. We were just totally ourselves from the very beginning. I let all of my walls down. I didn't feel concerned about my safety, or so we had no filters. And that was really refreshing. It's one of the things that I actually enjoy about connecting with people online, is you don't have to have those filters, because if you make a friend online and they turn into a jerk, you can block them. You can just like get rid of them, block them. You don't need them in your life anymore. You don't need that drama. You can just get rid of them. And that may sound overly harsh, but in my life, I've had some experiences, y'all. So we were completely unfiltered. We were totally ourselves. We got to know each other really deeply. I told her everything. She told me everything. And we were fast friends and did this for hours and hours and hours a day for quite a while. And then I want to say it was almost a year into knowing each other online and to spending this kind of time together. A friend of mine was getting married, and I was invited to be a part of the wedding. And the wedding was going to be taking place in Illinois, in Chicago. So for the first time ever in the time that I talked to Peggy, I opened a map. And I was like, that's about the furthest east I'm probably going to be in the next 10 years. So out of curiosity, I wanted to see how far away where she was, the town that she lived in, that I knew she lived in, St. Thomas in Ontario, how far away that was from where I was living. And I looked, or sorry, not from where I was living, from where the wedding was going to be. So I looked it up and I was like, ooh, it's like only like it's like a little bitty flight. It's not far at all. And so I mentioned that to Peggy, and we started planning our first visit. We didn't have a lot of expectations for that first visit. We thought we were going to connect. We had been flirting and lots of great chemistry, like dating style chemistry, the whole time we were talking, but we never had any of those expectations because, again, Canada. She was in Canada. I was in the US. Like, what were we going to do about it? She had 2 kids. Like, nothing was ever going to happen. So I was like, well, let's spend some time together. We're both consenting adults. Let's hang out. Let's see what happens. And neither of us, again, we thought it was going to be a single visit. That was it. Went out there. Oh, you guys, I had the most incredible week of my life that first week that I was with Peggy. We connected instantly. The chemistry was exactly as it had been because, again, we hadn't hidden any piece of ourselves. We were completely, everything was on the table. The only thing that I think took some getting used to was that we're the same height. We're the same height. And that took getting used to because every day when I would come home from work and turn on the chat to talk to Peggy, I would pull up this really overstuffed armchair in front of my computer, like a full, like almost like half love seat size. Pull it up in front of my computer because we would video chat. And I would plop down, and my computer was up higher, so I was always looking up at Peggy when we were talking. So meeting her in person, I was like, dude, I think I might be like a half-inch higher than you. That was the most jarring thing, which it wasn't very jarring. But the point is that there wasn't really anything jarring. Like, that was the only thing that seemed different from how we'd been in person. Or sorry, online. So we spent a week together and we had incredible experiences. Like, she sang to me, she danced with me in her living room. Like, it was the most romantic thing ever. And still, the entire week we're telling each other we're just friends. This is for fun. Like, it's fine. And we even leading into this, just so I can relate it to my shadow experience of the Fool, we made all kinds of plans. Like, we had several friends that knew the addresses, like that knew I was going to be there on her end and that knew where I was going on my end. I had safe calls set up so people were going to check in with me at specific points. I did all the safety stuff, and Peggy and I discussed very brutally honest, like, what happens if I get there and either one of us is uncomfortable or something goes weird. So we already had backup plans for me to have a hotel nearby. Like, everything was set up so that there would be no pressure. We could just hang out. But I did stay with her that whole week and with her kids and got to know them, and it was amazing how much we connected. Not a surprise, just it was really powerful. And I cried in the taxi cab back to the airport the entire time, just like leaking. Like, I could not believe I was leaving. And I didn't know what we were going to do or what I was going to do. I didn't realize how powerfully I felt about her until it was time to leave. And then what, right? And then what? What were we going to do? So I get to the airport to wait for my flight home. And there was an announcement that came on before boarding, and they said, we're overbooked. If anybody is willing to skip this flight and go home tomorrow, we'll fly you home tomorrow, and we'll give you a voucher to go anywhere that this airplane line goes in the next year on us. I am on the phone to Peggy right that second. Like, do I take this? Do I take this offer? Like, do you want me to come back? Am I gonna visit again? Like, is this gonna happen? Because if it's gonna happen, I'm totally taking the bump. Like, I'm gonna do this. And she's like, yeah, do it. So I did it. And I went home the next day, knowing that we could plan now a second trip. Because, again, financially, we weren't in the position to be doing all this back and forth travel. And again, she's got 2 kids. She's raising them as a single mom. I'm like low income in the States, like doing my thing. So I get home. And the week after I got home, a whole lot of stuff had to change. There was a whole lot of things happening in my life, and I'll probably get into that in other cards, or as we proceed through the tarot memoirs. There was a lot of happening, and a lot about that trip solidified where I was in my life versus where I wanted to be in my life. The places where I had settled into ruts, the places where I had let my life become complacency. And I didn't share that stuff with Peggy because I didn't want to put that on her and say, hey, visiting you totally changed my life, and here's all the stuff I'm going to do. And I also wasn't sure how to tell her that I realized I had fallen in love with her. I was the type of person at that point in my life that I did not make those kinds of vulnerable leaps. I would tell people how I felt about them if I was sure how they felt about me first. I would make changes in my life when I had groundwork laid, when things were for sure going to happen the way that I wanted them to. Things were stable and planned, and I would always know the outcome or think I knew the outcome. So the idea of telling Peggy that I had fallen in love with her, when I wasn't even sure there was anything we could do about it, was terrifying, and I still knew I needed to do it. So after I got some things in my personal life sorted out, I phoned her. And I said, so I think I've fallen in love with you. And she got very quiet. And she said, okay, I think I need to take some time to think about that. And we got off the phone. And that was probably those next couple of days. She took a couple of days, for real. Those were probably the scariest couple of days of my life because I didn't even know. I didn't even know she felt the same way. I didn't know if I had just like bared my soul to somebody who was like, nah, man. I mean, you all know it ended happy, but at the time I was like, what is happening right now? So a couple days later, she phones me back. And she says, okay, I feel the same way. And now we need to talk about what we're going to do about it. She got very practical very quickly and said, look, like, you're in the States. I can't move to the States. I don't qualify to immigrate. Immigrating to the States, you need to meet certain qualifications for points and so forth. I don't really know how it works, but she'd already done some lookups, I think, at that point. And she's like, it's not going to work. And I was like, okay. But at the time, gay marriage was legal in Canada, still is, but they were way ahead of the States. So this was like 13 years ago. And it was already legal in Canada, which is amazing. She said, you know, we can get married and you could immigrate to Canada. And so this is the kind of conversation we had. And keep in mind, at this point, we had seen each other in person once. We'd spent a week together once. And I know it's still, to me, looking back, it's like, it sounds crazy when I tell this story. But that day on that phone call, we decided we were going to go for it. We decided we were going to get married. And we also decided on that phone call, or I should say semi-decided, because Peggy still needed to talk to the boys and see how they felt, if they approved of this massive change to their life. Peggy at that point was already ready to move the boys to another town. She was in a small town. Both boys are gifted, very intelligent. There wasn't any universities or colleges in her area. They were only like 12 and 13, 11 and 12 at that time. So they were not quite high school age yet. And she's like, you know, I'm already ready to pick up and move somewhere. So we decided to give Vancouver a try. So it would allow me to immigrate to Canada, but also not be super far from my home and family where I'd grown up. I was still in contact with much of my family at that point in my life, and Peggy was not. The boys were not. They were kind of on their own out in St. Thomas. So we literally decided, we had a plan. Like, we made a plan that phone call, and nothing about that felt strange to me. Nothing about that felt wrong to me. I just knew. She knew. And we, you know, she later talked about it with the boys. They're like, yes, let's do this. I went out and saw Peggy again a few months later. We spent holiday time together that year. She officially proposed and gave me an engagement ring. We went out and had an engagement party. But really, we had already decided, like, this is what we're going to do. And it was a decision that was made in a very, like, almost, I don't want to say clinical, but it was kind of, because we had to know, is this even something that we can do? So, needless to say, I made this decision in a very fool energy kind of way. I made this decision to literally pick up from the life that I'd known my entire life, from an area I'd lived my entire life. I was like, yeah, I'm going to move to Canada, and I'm going to get married, and I'm going to be a stepmother, and I'm going to do all these things that I would have never in a million years thought I would do for anybody. But this was something that felt right for me. And I think that was the defining difference, was that my heart knew this is the next step for you. So on paper, yeah, Peggy and I actually technically only spent time together 3 times before she and the boys moved out here to Vancouver. We both left everything we ever knew. We both came to Vancouver as new to the area people. We started out living right in Vancouver. They didn't even visit before they moved to Vancouver. This is how amazing this whole full experience was. They didn't even visit. I found us a place to live from Seattle. I came up and like found us a place. I made arrangements so that financially we would be okay. Like, made arrangements through my work. Peggy made arrangements through like her work. She knew that she would be okay financially. Like, we sorted all of this stuff out. The day that Peggy and my boys, John and Steve, got on the plane, our boys, they're my boys too. The day they got on the plane, none of them had ever been on an airplane before in their lives. The day they got on the plane to move to Vancouver was the first time they'd ever been to Vancouver. And like, my heart still goes pitter-pat thinking about how swept up in all of that I was at the time. And that Fool experience was open-hearted. That was like, yes. That was like capital letters, yes, over and over again. Yes, 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 yes. This is the thing I'm going to do. And it's right. And it's real. And we're now 12 and a half years married. Well, maybe not a half. It was like August. So 12 and a little bit married. I immigrated. I am a citizen now of Canada as well as the States. Best decision, obviously, I've ever made in my entire life. I got to become a mom. I got to be a wife. Zero regrets. And I found out later, I know this is a very long story, but I found out later, and I don't remember how later, after that first phone call when Peggy finally called me back and said, okay, what are we going to do? I found out later that the reason she needed to take a couple of days was because when I left St. Thomas, while I was dealing with all of my personal life stuff and trying to get things sorted out so that I could tell her that I was in love with her and see what came next, while I was doing that, she was thinking, I am in love with a woman who lives in the States, in Washington. Sorry, my virus thing came up. I had to close it. Okay. She's thinking, I'm in love with this woman. We literally spend 6-7 hours a day talking on the phone. I've got no time in my life to actually meet women in my area. And so Peggy was actually starting to hit this realization that this couldn't go on with us just spending all this time together. And she was probably going to have to call the whole dang thing off. So when I phoned to tell her how I felt about her, she was in the middle of gearing herself up to tell me that that visit that I had planned by taking that bump on the airplane was probably never going to happen, that we were going to have to just call it quits. And it still makes me hold my breath a little bit, because to think, if I had not made, oh, I'm going to get emotional. Whew. Drink coffee. If I had not trusted my heart, if I had not chosen to put it all out on the table, if I had chosen not to take a risk in that circumstance, none of this would have ever happened. I wouldn't be living here. I wouldn't be a mom to 2 incredible now man children. I wouldn't have gotten married to the absolute love of my life, my absolute soulmate. None of that would have happened. That is the defining Fool moment of my life. That was huge. And it became a topic of conversation with family and friends for a long time after, because they're like, on the surface, it looks like, hey, I met some chick online and then I moved to Canada. It was, I think, a big surprise to a lot of the people in my life how powerful this whole thing was for me, because nobody saw the behind the scenes stuff. To people in my life, this was a huge shock, because it was like, all of the interaction Peggy and I had was private. It was all at home on our computers and video chat, and it was a process. It was a road between that first phone call and having it all come to be. There was a long distance relationship we had to maintain in between those 2 points. There was figuring out the immigration process and the very slowness of that process and making it all happen. And trust me, many couples, have a lot longer to wait than we did for the immigration process to go through. But we were married and still living separately before I moved to Canada, because we had to wait for all of that stuff to happen. But there was a lot in between those 2 points to get us here. And along the way, we both commented and noticed over and over again, synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity. Things would fall into place just so that things could happen the way they needed to happen for us to be together. It was profound. Red tape fell away. I can't even I could make a list of 100 different things we noticed where the universe, God, Goddess, whatever, however you want to see it, everything, the path was just cleared for us. It was made as easy as something like this could be for us. It was incredible. So that is my Fool story. And this is Tarot Memoirs. And I'm going to have to cut this short, finish my coffee, and I might film another short video. We'll see, because I've got a couple of other ideas I want to get out of my head. But thank you for joining me. And if this series resonates with you, if you like the idea of taking the tarot and applying it directly to your life and sharing experiences, I would love if you would do that. please feel free to call it Tarot Memoirs. You can use a hashtag Tarot Memoirs. You can do whatever you want. Share as much or as little as you want. But if you have a full experience you want to share, something that you feel makes that card and the energy of that card very real for you in your life, please do. I would love to watch it. And if you do tag it, then it'll be really easy for me to find your video. So if you use the hashtag Tarot Memoirs, I should be able to find it. I really hope that some of you will participate. I would love to hear some of your full experiences. Next week, we will tackle the Magician, and we'll dive into that. I don't know that every single video is going to be this crazy long. I think we're at almost an hour now. But I had a lot to say about this card. And it makes sense because the Fool is such a defining card, and the major arcana are big for a reason. So I suspect a lot, yeah, let's just be honest, a lot of the major arcana cards, these videos are probably going to be kind of long. So I hope in this you've gotten to know me a little bit better, and that there's something that you can take away from this that has made the Fool more tangible for you. And if you have any questions or comments on anything I've put in this video, please leave them below. I love the interaction. I love seeing what your thoughts are. If you enjoy this content, if you're definitely happy for it to continue. If nobody's into this, then let's be honest, I'll probably still do it because, you know, I like it. Anyways, I hope you have an amazing day, and I will talk to you all again very, very soon.